Thubten Gyatso was the 13th Dalai Lama of Tibet. In 1878 he was recognized as the reincarnation of the Dalai Lama. He was escorted to Lhasa and given his pre-novice vows by the Panchen Lama Tenpai Wangchuk, unnamed Ngawang, Lobsang, Thubten Gyatso, Jigdral, Chokley, Namgyal. In 1879 he was enthroned at the Potala Palace, but did not assume political power until 1895, after he had reached his maturity. Thubten Gyatso was an intelligent reformer who proved himself a skillful politician when Tibet became a pawn in British and Russian rivalry. He was responsible for countering the British expedition to Tibet, restoring discipline in monastic life, and increasing the number of lay officials to avoid excessive power being placed in the hands of the monks' family. The 13th Dalai Lama was born in the village of Thakpo Langdon, one day by car, southeast from Lhasa and near Samye Monastery, Thakpo Province. In June 1876 to parents Kung Rinchen and Lobsang Dolma, a peasant couple. Laird gives his birth date as the 27th of May 1876, and Mullen gives it as dawn on the 5th month of the fire mouse year. Enthronement. In 1879, he was enthroned in the Grand Reception Hall at the Potala Palace. The ceremony was approved by an imperial edict. According to King historian Max Oitman, the Lhasa Ambans were involved in the installation of the 3-year-old incarnation on his dais. On the first day, the young Dalai Lama was taken before the image of Emperor Qianlong and performed the 3 genuflections and 9 prostrations before it. On the next day, in the Great Dugang Hall, the Emperor's congratulatory edict was read out, and the Dalai Lama, together with the regent, again performed the Kito and bowed in the direction of the court. Contact with Ajahn Dorjiev. Ajahn Dorjiev, a Kori-Buryat Mongol and a Russian subject, was born in the village of Karashabir, not far from Ulan-Ude, to the east of Lake Baikal. He left home in 1873 at 19 to study at the Gelugpa Monastery, Drepung, near Lhasa, the largest monastery in Tibet. Having successfully completed the traditional course of religious studies, he began the academic Buddhist degree of Geshe Larampa. He continued his studies to become Sanad Hambo, or Master of Buddhist Philosophy. He became a tutor and debating partner of the teenage Dalai Lama, who became very friendly with him and later used him as an envoy to Russia and other countries. CGE Mannerheim met Thubten Gyatso in Utaishan during the course of his expedition from Turkestan to Peking. Mannerheim wrote his diary and notes in Swedish to conceal the fact that his ethnographic and scientific party was also an elaborate intelligence-gathering mission for the Russian army. The 13th Dalai Lama gave a blessing of white silk for the Russian Tsar and in return received Mannerheim's precious 7-shot officer's pistol with a full explanation of its use, as a gift. Obviously, the 14th Dalai Lama said the 13th Dalai Lama had a keen desire to establish relations with Russia, and I also think he was a little skeptical toward England at first. Then there was Dorjiev. To the English he was a spy, but in reality he was a good scholar and a sincere Buddhist monk who had great devotion to the 13th Dalai Lama. Military expeditions in Tibet. After the British expedition to Tibet by Sir Francis Younghusband in early 1904, Dorjiev convinced the Dalai Lama to flee to Urga in Mongolia, almost 2,400 kilometers to the northeast of Lhasa, a journey which took 4 months. The Dalai Lama spent over a year in Urga and the Wangkure monastery giving teachings to the Mongolians. In Urga, the Dalai Lama met several times the 8th Bogd Geguen Jetsundam Barkutuk, spiritual leader of Outer Mongolia. The content of these meetings is unknown. According to report from A.D. Kitrovo, the Russian border commissioner in Kyakhta town, the Dalai Lama and the influential Mongol Kutuktis, high lamas and princes irrevocably decided to secede from China as an independent federal state, carrying out this operation under the patronage and support from Russia, taking care to avoid the bloodshed. The Dalai Lama insisted that if Russia would not help, he would even ask Britain, his former foe, for assistance. After the Dalai Lama fled, the Qing dynasty immediately proclaimed him deposed and again asserted sovereignty over Tibet, making claims over Nepal and Bhutan as well. The Treaty of Lhasa was signed at the Potala between Great Britain and Tibet in the presence of the Amban and Nepalese and Bhutanese representatives, on the 7th of September 1904. The provisions of the 1904 treaty were confirmed in a 1906 treaty signed between Great Britain and China. The British, for a fee from the King Court, also agreed not to annex Tibetan territory or to interfere in the administration of Tibet, while China engaged not to permit any other foreign state to interfere with the territory or internal administration of Tibet. The Dalai Lama was suspected of involvement in the anti-foreign 1905 Tibetan rebellion. The British invasion of Lhasa in 1904 had repercussions in the Tibetan Buddhist world, causing extreme anti-Western and anti-Christian sentiment among Tibetan Buddhists. The British invasion also triggered intense and sudden Qing intervention in Tibetan areas to develop, assimilate, and bring the regions under strong Qing central control. The Tibetan lamas in Batang proceeded to revolt in 1905, massacring Chinese officials, French missionaries, and Christian Catholic converts. The Tibetan monks opposed the Catholics, razing the Catholic Missions Church, and slaughtering all Catholic missionaries and Qing officials. The Manchu Qing official Feng Quan was assassinated by the Tibetan Batang lamas, along with other Manchu and Han Chinese Qing officials and the French Catholic priests, who were all massacred when the rebellion started in March 1905. Tibetan Gelugpa monks in Ngawang, Chamdu, and Latang also revolted and attacked missions and churches and slaughtered Westerners. The British invasion of Lhasa, the missionaries, and the King were linked in the eyes of the Tibetans as hostile foreigners to be attacked. Zhongshan was the location of Batang Monastery. The Tibetans slaughtered the converts, torched the building of the missionaries in Batang due to the xenophobia. Sir Francis Edward Younghusband read that at the same time, on the opposite side of Tibet they were still more actively aggressive, expelling the Roman Catholic missionaries from their long-established homes at Batang, massacring many of the converts, and burning the mission house. There was anti-Christian sentiment and xenophobia running rampant in Tibet. Number 10. Dispatch from Consul General Wilkinson to Sir E. Satow, dated Yunnan Fu, 28 April 1905. Père Maire, the provocateur of the Roman Catholic mission here, called this morning to show me a telegram which he had just received from a native priest of his mission at Tali. The telegram, which is in Latin, is dated Tali, the 24th of April, and is to the effect that the lamas of Batang have killed P.P. Musset and Soli, together with, it is believed, 200 converts. The chapel at Atense has been burnt down, and the lamas hold the road to Takin Lu. Père Bourdanek begs that Père Maire will take action. Père Maire has accordingly written to M. Leduc, my French colleague, who will doubtless communicate with the Governor-General. The provocateur is of opinion that the missionaries were attacked by orders of the ex-Dalai Lama, is the nearest Europeans on whom he could avenge his disgrace. He is good enough to say that he will give me any further information which he may receive. I am telegraphing to you the news of the massacre. I have, and amp. C. W. H. Wilkinson, East India Papers relating to Tibet, issues 2-4, Great Britain. Foreign Office, p. 12. Tibetans' Christian families gunned down after refusing to give up the religion at Yanjing at the hands of the 13th Dalai Lama's messengers at the same time during the 1905 rebellion, when Father Du Bernard was beheaded and all the French missionaries were slaughtered by the Tibetan Buddhist lamas. The name Field of Blood was given to where the slaughter happened. In October 1906, John Weston Brooke was the first Englishman to gain an audience with the Dalai Lama, and subsequently he was granted permission to lead 2 expeditions into Tibet. Also in 1906, Sir Charles Alfred Bell was invited to visit Thubten Gyatso, the 9th Panchen Lama at Tashil Hunpo, where they had friendly discussions on the political situation. The Dalai Lama later stayed at the Great Kumbum Monastery near Xining and then traveled east to the most sacred of 4 Buddhist mountains in China, Wat Shan, located 300 kilometers from Beijing. From here, the Dalai Lama received a parade of envoys. William Woodville Rockhill, the American minister in Peking; Gustav Mannerheim, a Russian army colonel; a German doctor from the Peking legation; an English explorer named Christopher Irving; R.F. Johnson, a British diplomat from the colonial service; and Henry Dollon, the French army major and viscount. The Dalai Lama was mounting a campaign to strengthen his international ties and free his kingdom from Chinese rule. Worried about his safety, Mannerheim even gave Tibet's spiritual pontiff a Browning revolver and showed him how to reload the weapon. In September 1908, the Dalai Lama was granted an audience with the Guangxu Emperor and Empress Dorje Cixi. The emperor tried to stress Tibet's subservient role, although the Dalai Lama refused to kowtow to him. He stayed in Beijing until the end of 1908. When he returned to Tibet in December 1908, he began reorganizing the government, but the king sent a military expedition of its own to Tibet in 1910 and he had to flee to India. In 1911, the Qing dynasty was overthrown in the Xinhai Revolution, and by the end of 1912 the last Qing troops had been escorted out of Tibet. Assumption of political power. In 1895, Thubten Gyatso assumed ruling power from the monasteries which had previously wielded great influence through the regent. Due to his 2 periods of exile in 1904 to 1909, to escape the British invasion of 1904, and from 1910 to 1913 to escape the Chinese invasion, he became well aware of the complexities of international politics and was the first Dalai Lama to become aware of the importance of foreign relations. The Dalai Lama, accompanied by 6 ministers and a small escort which included his close aide, diplomat and military figure Zarong Gyatso, fled via Jelepla to Sikkim and Darjeeling, where they stayed almost 2 years. During this period he was invited to Calcutta by the Viceroy, Lord Minto, which helped restore relations with the British. Thubten Gyatso returned to Lhasa in January 1913, with Zarong Gyatso from Darjeeling, where he had been living in exile. The new Chinese government apologized for the actions of the previous Qing dynasty and offered to restore the Dalai Lama to his former position. He replied that he was not interested in Chinese ranks and was assuming spiritual and political leadership of Tibet. After his return from exile in India in 1913, Thubten Gyatso assumed control of foreign relations and dealt directly with the Maharaja and the British political officer in Sikkim and the King of Nepal rather than letting the Kashaga Parliament do it. Thubten Gyatso declared independence from China in early 1913, after returning from India following 3 years of exile. He then standardized the Tibetan flag in its present form. At the end of 1913, 1912, the first postage stamps of Tibet and the first banknotes were issued. Thubten Gyatso built a new medical college in 1913 on the site of the post-revolutionary traditional hospital near the Jokang. Legislation was introduced to counter corruption among officials, a national taxation system was established and enforced, and a police force was created. The penal system was revised and made uniform throughout the country. Capital punishment was completely abolished and corporal punishment was reduced. Living conditions in jails were also improved, and officials were designated to see that these conditions and rules were maintained. A secular education system was introduced in addition to the religious education system. Thubten Gyatso sent 4 promising students to England to study, and welcomed foreigners, including Japanese, British and Americans. As a result of his travels and contacts with foreign powers and the representatives, the Dalai Lama showed an interest in world affairs and introduced electricity, the telephone and the first motor cars to Tibet. Nonetheless, at the end of his life in 1933, he saw that Tibet was about to enter a dark age. In 1932, the Muslim King He and Han Chinese Sichuan armies of the National Revolutionary Army led by Chinese Muslim General Ma Bufang and Han General Liu Wenwei defeated the Tibetan army in the Sino-Tibetan War when the 13th Dalai Lama tried to seize territory in Qinghai and Zikang. Ma Bufang overran the Tibetan armies and recaptured several counties in Zikang province. Shikdenki and other counties were seized from the Tibetans. The Tibetans were pushed back to the other side of the Jinsha River. Ma and Liu warned Tibetan officials not to dare cross the Jinsha River again. Ma Bufang defeated the Tibetans at Dancho Korgon. Several Tibetan generals surrendered, and were demoted by the Dalai Lama. By August, the Tibetans lost so much land to Liu Wenwei and Ma Bufang's forces that the Dalai Lama telegraphed the British government of India for assistance. British pressure led to Nanjing declaring a ceasefire. Separate truces were signed by Ma and Liu with the Tibetans in 1933, ending the fighting, prophecies and death. The 13th Dalai Lama predicted before dying, "Very soon in this land deceptive acts may occur from without and within. At that time, if we do not dare to protect our territory, our spiritual personalities, including the victorious father and son, may be exterminated without trace. The property and authority of our lakangs and monks may be taken away. Moreover, our political system, developed by the 3 great Dharma kings, will vanish without anything remaining. The property of all people, high and low, will be seized and the people forced to become slaves. All living beings will have to endure endless days of suffering and will be stricken with fear. Such a time will come